Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, featuring industry thought leaders sharing problem-solving insights to help grow your business and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stewart Andrew Alexander.
Hi, and welcome to another Let's Talk Divorce conversation. And during this segment of the show, ladies and gentlemen, I am so pleased to say that we finally have family law attorney John Whitbeck, shareholder at Whitbeck, Cisneros Mcelroy, all the way from Leesburg in Virginia. Now, John, who is considered to be a leader in the area of family and matrimonial law, will be talking to you today about dealing with mental illness in divorce. Now, that sounds like a really interesting topic, so we can't wait to have him on the show. So if you are one of the increasing numbers of individuals in the Leesburg, Virginia area today, and you're listening in right now, you just might want to, give yourself a break. Down tools, log out of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or anything else you happen to be doing which may cause a distraction, and get ready to listen in to what John has to share with us today. So, with that said, let's not keep him waiting any longer. Welcome to the show, John.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome, John. So let's make the best use of the time that we have together today. Briefly, in your own words, of course, describe the kinds of people who you serve and the various types of situations they find themselves in when they come to you for your help.
Well, of course, being a family law attorney, we deal with families. And my cases have, over the course of my career, tended to have a majority dealing with families that are dealing with mental illness, whether it's a husband who's coming to see me because his wife is mentally ill, or vice versa. You know, mental illness is something that permeates every area of family law. It's a really big issue in custody and visitation. It's a big issue in dealing with spousal support, the division of property. So very frequently, my cases involve people who are mentally ill or who have spouses who are mentally ill, and how we deal with their divorce through that lens, with mental illness being such a prominent part of this divorce.
Thanks for sharing that, John. It's great that we now have an idea of who you help. Before we move on to our next question, let's just take a moment to make it absolutely clear that anything you share with us from this point on is not legal advice or legal assistance. It's purely for the purpose of disseminating information. Can we both agree on that today then, John?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so with that said then, John, when you think about those people who you just described, the people who you help, what's the most common misconception you come across while you're out there helping them on a day-to-day basis?
Well, mental illness in society at large has a stigma attached to it. There's a lot of misconceptions just in general and misunderstanding about what mental illness is and how you deal with it. And I think a lot of people who come to us in their in their divorce cases are feeling like they're exposed or they're vulnerable because they may be dealing with a disability in the form of a mental health issue. And we try to share with them some of our past experiences and some of the ways the law deals with these things, and try to make them feel a little bit more comfortable. Just because you suffer from a mental illness doesn't mean you're going to lose custody of your children. It doesn't mean that if you're on the other side, just because your spouse suffers from mental illness doesn't mean they can't work. It doesn't mean they can't be a part of the family or society at large. Mental illness is a disability just like anything else that may be physical. And we try to make sure people understand that in giving them the advice that we give them.
So based on what you just shared with us then, John, and obviously keeping your client's confidentiality in mind, please share an example or a case study, so to speak, of how you have helped, or even how you would go about helping somebody with that challenge or that misconception you just described, and what kind of transformational results you were able to, or, in general, would be able to gain for them.
Well, I'll give you the two main examples of where mental health really comes into play is, first of all, in custody cases. And I recall one case in particular where, my client came to me. He was forced to travel a lot for his job, and his wife was severely mentally ill. He had two children. They were not young children, but they weren't quite teenagers. And so, with his job and her being a stay-at-home mom, he was forced to travel a lot, and he had to be away. And it was very difficult for him to do so because his wife just wasn't functioning. We were able to put together a strategy that wasn't designed to get a divorce because he wanted to save his marriage and go forward, but a strategy where we did use a custody lawsuit in order to get her to commit to psychiatric treatment. In other words, if, as a condition of continuing to have joint custody with your husband, you have to get mental health treatment. It worked very effectively because not everybody wants to get a divorce who comes in to see us. And mental health issues, they're so difficult to deal with, but there are ways out of it. Another great example is, people have this misconception that a mentally ill spouse can't, it can't work. And especially men who are going to, or women who are going to be paying spousal support because they're the higher income earner or the only income earner in the family. And I can explain to them, look, just because someone's mentally ill doesn't mean they can't work. And that's a really big issue in dealing with spouse support. So really custody and spouse support are the two areas we see at most impact our cases in family law.
So, as a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is family law attorney John Whitbeck, shareholder at Whitbeck, Cisneros Mcelroy, all the way from Leesburg, Virginia. And he's here today talking about dealing with mental illness in divorce. Now, with that in mind, John, and for those individuals who are listening right now, please share one common, and I'm absolutely aware of there are so many pitfalls that you could share with us today. However, please share one or two of the most unknown pitfalls that they need to be aware of, no matter what situation they find themselves in.
Well, one of the things that's very important that could be a pitfall, a divorce, there's a lot of times when divorce is settled, there's a contract that gets signed or they agree to an order, the attorneys agree to an order. You have to be very careful, though. If somebody suffers from a substantial mental illness, one that directly impacts their capacity to understand the terms of a contract or consent to the terms of an agreement, you could run into a problem where everything can be undone. So you want to make sure if you're coming to your divorce case and your spouse is extremely mentally ill and is not functioning and is one of the more extreme cases we see, make sure that you have a psychologist or a psychiatrist give an opinion whether that person has the capacity to understand. Because people are very relieved when they settle their cases, and you don't want it to be undone because your spouse didn't understand the terms or just under the definition under the law didn't have the capacity to reach an agreement.
So, John, I'm kind of curious. How many years have you been a practicing family law attorney?
I've been practicing for 16 years, going on 17. So, yeah, been a long career.
And I guess you've helped, possibly hundreds, if not thousands of people within that space of time, right?
Very much so. And, I used to run a clinic that provided pro bono legal services to families with mental health issues. So my experience around this area is beyond just family law. It's really mental health law in general.
So, John, let me ask you this then. When you think back to all of those people who you've worked with, all those families, those individuals, and you've helped them to achieve their desired goals, on a deep down, personal level, John, what does it give you and how does it actually make you feel?
Well, mental health issues is one of the things that drives me in my profession. Especially in my state, we're in a crisis situation. It's underfunded. There's not enough bed space. There's like I said earlier, a misconception about mental health just in general. And, one of the things I've tried to do in my practice is bring a voice to those people who are struggling with family members who have a mental illness. It's a lifelong struggle. Parents of mentally ill children, men and women whose spouse, suffering from illness. It's a really incredible feeling to help those folks get through these what are the most difficult cases, in my opinion, and it's something that I'm really glad I've spent my career in that field.
So let's spend a brief moment talking a little bit more about yourself, your backstory, John, and your formal education, and especially your experience as it relates to family law, and the topic of mental health illness.
Well, early in my career, I was asked to substitute for a professor of mine at George Mason Law School, where I graduated from in Arlington, Virginia. I was asked to substitute in her mental health law class. She then left to go on to other things, and the dean asked me to take it over. So I taught mental illness law for close to 10 years. And in that time, specific part of the class was training students on the practice of law and representing actual clients. So over the course of 10 years or so, we represented literally thousands of families in cases involving mental illness. And during that time, I was also a I was a substitute judge in the Virginia District Courts, which dealt with a lot of criminal cases, custody and visitation cases, cases, of course, that had a lot to do with mental health, but just cases in general. And then I also served as what we call in Virginia special justice, which is a judge just for mental health commitment cases. And so really been a part of my practice all along, and I get the word out about that, and I'm one of the very few, and I'm not aware of any others in Virginia that actually market and hold themselves or herself out there as a mental illness lawyer. But family law is the vast majority of what we do, and but I have many other things that I do as well in the mental health field.
So for those individuals who are listening right now, John, what final thoughts would you like to leave them with before we finish up with our last question for today?
If you're struggling with mental illness, it is a disability just like anything else. The law protects you. Talking to a competent attorney who understands those issues is very important. If you're someone who's dealing with a loved one, child, spouse who suffers from mental illness, this is a very difficult struggle for you, and an attorney who has experience and can relate with you on past cases that have the strategies that work. It's all about coming up with the right strategy for dealing with the situation, and that's something that a good attorney can do for you if your case involves mental health issues.
So let me just ask you an additional question, John, that I just thought about. Just how widespread is mental illness in divorce?
In almost every case I deal with, there's some element of it. Sometimes it's, people just making wild accusations that my wife is crazy or my husband's crazy. But substance abuse is a big issue, and the definition of substance abuse in Virginia is that it is a mental illness. So substance abuse, actual mental disabilities, sometimes people with physical injuries. So the vast majority of cases, there's some element of it. How can you not be suffering from some sort of depression or anxiety or something, or high stress when you're going through what is a really terrible thing to go through? Sure. So I think it's a really critical part of understanding, what people are going through in divorces, and using that, using an attorney who gets that, it really is to your advantage.
And another thing I just thought about then, John, what kind of effect does this have on children and in divorce?
Well, it's extremely important. I mean, the children are caught in the middle of two people at war with each other over so many things. Emotions are high, and one of the things I've noticed is that children, no matter how much you try to shield them from what's going on, they see and hear everything. They know that something is wrong. They know that a parent is ill. They know that parents are fighting with each other. And, you can do a lot of lasting damage to a child's perception of relationships, a child's, a perception of what a healthy and an unhealthy marriage is by not handling it correctly. And I see so many parents impose upon their children just inappropriate levels of exposure to these conflicts. And it's very important that not happen, because children, this is not their fault, and they need to know that they're going to still have two parents when all is said and done.
And obviously, no need to feel any kind of shame or embarrassment if you feel you have a case of mental illness within your family, right?
Absolutely. Again, it's just a disability. It's no different than if you suffered from, some kind of physical disability or genetic disorder, anything. I mean, this is something that just happens to be in your mind, and it's treatable. People with mental illness are just as able to be part of our society as anyone else, and it's really important that we remember that, and that we not use it as a weapon against people in these cases. And even in the cases where I represent the non-mentally ill spouse, I always make sure that my clients understand that the other side is hurting. They're suffering from something that's debilitating and difficult to go through. And it's important to have compassion even when you're going through a divorce case where people are on opposite sides.
Okay then, John, so if there is somebody out there who feels they want to know more about dealing with mental illness in divorce, how can they reach you? What's the best way?
Well, our website, whitbecklegal.com, has more information about what we do. I can always be reached by phone, 703-777-1795, or by email at jwhitbeck, WHITBECK, @whitbecklegal.com. We don't give legal advice over the phone or by email, but certainly people can reach out, contact us, and schedule a time to come talk to me.
Okay, folks, that's all we have time for today. It's such a shame. I've got question after question after question to pose for John, and I feel that he's just beginning to touch the tip of the iceberg with the amount of insights that he could have shared. However, we do have to go. So let me remind you again, ladies and gentlemen, we have been listening to family law attorney John Whitbeck. Thank you so much for sharing so generously with us today, John. You have certainly demonstrated, without a doubt, that you are a true educator, advocate, and trustworthy advisor for your client's success. So thank you.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. And I'd also, I'd like to say a big thank you to you, our listener. Maybe you do find yourself in that position where you're thinking about, there are issues with mental illness in your family, in your divorce. And if that's the case, thank you for joining us on this insightful and informative discussion with one of the top family law attorneys in Leesburg, Virginia today. Again, his name is John Whitbeck. Make sure you do check him out, give him a call, visit his website, whatever you do decide to do. I'm sure that after listening to John today, you're going to be in good hands. So that's it for today, folks. Again, my name is Stewart Andrew Alexander, and we'll be back shortly with some more leading family law professionals in this, our series of Let's Talk Divorce Conversations. So, until then, take care, have a great day, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.